we're covering what we need to today. Who can remember what we were doing last week towards the end? It's all right. Shall we run our game here real quick? See if it jogs your memory. We'll let it compile for a second. All right. We put in our water, right? We put in our ocean. And we talked about, we kind of glossed over actually loading a file from the file system. So today, we're gonna try my hand at something that I'm kind of a novice at best. We're going to do a little bit more illustration, a little bit more drawing. So let's look at some pictures of some ships. I think we might use this one. Does everybody feel about this one for their ship that we use? I looked, and it was really hard to find ships that had a good just profile. And so this is one I think I found that looks pretty good. So we'll save this image. Let's see. We will just save it in downloads. That's what, a DDG65, right? Is that what I'm seeing? Okay. So we will open up Inkscape. Now, I wish I could tell you like how to use Inkscape well. It kind of reaches the extent of my skills, but we are going to play with it and at least familiarize people with kind of the process of what we're going to be doing, and then we'll hope that I can answer some questions. So we're going to open up, actually I think I hit the wrong button. We want to import. And we're going to go to our downloads, and we downloaded this ship, and we're going to open it up in here. So this is the ship that we downloaded, right? I'm not too crazy. We'll just shrink it down for our canvas size. But who does graphic design? A little bit. Art, so some illustration kind of stuff, because that's what we're going to be doing here. So we're going to start trying to trace. Oh, I don't want to do that one, that color. So we've got our Bezier pen. If that's what it's called, I think that's what it's called. And we're just going to trace a rough outline, and we're going to imagine that the ship's going to come below the water line. And then we can come back here. There's a secret that I know because I've looked at a lot of pictures, but there's a little kind of up spot that goes right there for the propeller to run. Oh. That's not what I wanted it to do. I wanted to keep on with my line. Let's try that again. Okay, so I'm going to run to about here. And right now, let's see. Keeps on doing what I don't want it to do. This screen is really hard for me to see what we're doing. Okay. Let's try it with this one. This is what I did before. I think this maybe might be the one that works. Okay, so we'll go straight across. We'll just doesn't want to cooperate with me. Okay, so let's zoom in here just a little bit. We will put this main tower in. If you're a lot better at illustration than I am, you can probably come up with this on your own and design this on your own or look at it, but I need to trace it. Okay, so we'll come here. We'll close this off. All right, and then we will hit that. And we will path, and we will do a union. So that'll give us one. Okay. So we've got our opacity turned down so we can kind of see this a little bit better. And then we're going to come over here. And we're going to envision a propeller. With a support. Okay. Actually. I know this is super exciting watching somebody pretend like they know what they're doing when it comes to drawing stuff. Maybe just a little bit bigger. All right, and then back here. Okay. Does that look somewhat like a propeller? Is it going to be good enough? You'll probably leave today realizing that we're doing the class more because of my programming skills and not because of my art skills. Let's see, path, object to path, and then group that together. Okay, so we've just basically made a propeller on our boat. Maybe not the best boat. What do you guys think? Kind of rough? Let's see.
So you're just using that for your outline?
Yeah, I'm just kind of trying to use the boat to give me a rough
I think it looks amazing.
estimate.
Better than I would.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so let's move that again. Oh, I'm still trying to get used to doing things on this huge TV. So we've got a little bit of an outline of a boat here. If we look at it, we've kind of got a little bit darker down here below, a little bit lighter up here above. So we'll kind of start working on adding some of those different lighting features in. Okay. So we're going to take our pen again. Okay. And we will duplicate that layer. And we're going to go and we'll do an intersection. And then it will give us just our top layer there. And we can make it a little bit lighter color. Do an intersection and that one. I think I killed one of my lines. What do you guys think? I think I did. Yep, I forgot to duplicate it. Duplicate and then intersection. Is that a decent enough little ship to run with? So like I said, you didn't come here for my graphics abilities, but hopefully we at least have a little bit of a ship that we can work with. But that's probably way too big if our game window is 720 by 1280.
Can you have the engine scale it inside, or is that more load on the
You can. There is some scale functionality available, but I mean, this is pretty big, so I think we would probably get a little bit better performance if we did scale it inside of our graphics engine. So we'll do that. Let's see, we're going to group it together, and we are going to flip it the other way. More so just because that's the direction all my assets seem to run is that direction. Okay. Trying to figure out why it even looks like it's still a little bit transparent. Maybe it's just me, I don't know.
Do you have a gradient set on it?
I didn't think I did.
I think it's just because the program is to like show you where the boundaries of the
You may very well be right. That's what we'll do right there. Maybe not the best looking ship, but we have a ship. Is that? So we'll save this right here, and we'll put it into our raw assets directory. Oh, sorry, my caps lock was on. Didn't notice that. And we will export a version of this. All right, so thinking down the line just a little bit, we're gonna probably wanna animate things a little. Probably the boat, we could maybe make it bob just a little bit. So to do that, we're gonna create a new directory for our ship so that we can kind of keep all of our components ordered. And then we'll get to a library that I've been working on here in a little bit, but I have a way that you can just pass in a directory and then how many images in that directory you want to load. And then if they're named 0, 1, 2, so consecutively that way, it will just load that many and return it in a slice. So we'll just name this ship 0. So in their ship directory 0.ping. And if we wanted to, we could probably lower our ship just a little bit. And then we could export another one. Let's see. We'll name this 1. If it will let me. I'll tell you, this whole TV thing is really throwing me for a loop. Okay, I think we're good that way. So we'll have.
Do you have something different running on your main screen?
Yeah, so the screen capture that I'm running to.
Because yeah, I'll usually, if I have to drive a big one, I'll just duplicate the screen so that I'm not having to try to do it up there.
Yeah,
But if you got some other stuff running, you can't really do that.
Yeah, I tried to figure out how can I get all of this set up so that I can so we can record it
Yeah.
and see like what I'm recording and make sure that things are working that way. So okay, so we've got 3 images and we're probably going to want to rename 0 and 1 because I moved 0 all the way to the bottom and 2 all the way to the top, but we'll worry about that in a minute. So if we come back here, we should be able to look into our assets directory and see our 0 and our 1. Let's just reload it real quick. Oh, I forgot to hit the actual export button. I think. Let's try this again, shall we? Assets.
Wait, check your home screen real fast. I think I know.
Check my home screen.
The
You saved it
home.
in the wrong spot.
Oh, I may have. When you say my home screen, you mean just the code or here?
In your files, there was a
Oh.
home tab.
You're probably right. It probably got saved in the home directory and caused this problem because we've got it here. So we've got a couple images here now where the ship's at different heights. So we'll work on that in a little bit. It's going to be a bit of a discussion again. Like I said, I think 0 and 1 should be swapped. Just because I saved it in the middle for 0 and then at the bottom for 1 and then at the top for 2, so it'll go like 0, 1, 2, and then it won't have like a good animation, if that makes sense. Okay, so we'll rename this. Yes, it's okay. this one to be 1. I'll rename this one to be 0 to fix our problem. All right, so we've got a couple images that we can work with, and we talked down here last week about loading our images and like loading them from the file system and then using it and drawing it. So we're going to make a little bit more progress on that this week. We've got our ship. We'll need our ship here in just a little bit as well. I'm trying to think of the best way to go about where we're headed. There's a library that we're going to pull in that I've worked on for the class. And go to D, that we're going to use. And it has a couple things in it that we'll be able to use. One of them is an asset loader. One of them is a simple finite state machine, which we'll probably talk about those a little bit today, but they're kind of complex, and so we're going to gloss over them. There's just a couple components that I've created for like drawing outlines and drawing animations. And then it has some collisions as well. So let's look at this loader real quick. So if you remember last week, we talked a little bit about how you can embed your assets into the compiled binary. This loader actually works with that idea. And this fs.fs it's a virtual file system that lives inside of the program once it's compiled. And then the program knows how to get access to it, and then we can load all of our data from there. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about kind of some high level of embedding and creating this asset loader, and then we'll use this asset loader to load some of our images that we've created. First, we're going to need to bring it into our project. And there's our kind of our import command. All right, so that will bring it into our project.
What is that command doing exactly?
Yeah, we'll go over it real quick. So go get is the command that pulls in a library, and if you remember to bring in the ebitengine game library, we did the go get, and then whatever the import path for that the game engine was, I don't remember exactly. But the same thing's happening here. We're just saying, okay, there's some code in this GitLab repository. Go and pull it, and then we can bring it into our project. And then if we look at our go mod file, we will see that we've got this go2d library that's been pulled in, and now we'll have access to the structs and things that I've created in that library to go along with the class. I hope you don't. If you do, I might have set it up the privacy improperly. Did you try to pull it in?
I tried it, but I might not have had your URL exactly correct.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a GitHub. I can sign in.
Well, this is on GitLab instead of GitHub. No, that's all right. It should.
So you have this hosted somewhere different than ours.
Yeah. Sorry. I kind of jumped around where I wanted to put my projects, but this one's on GitLab. So it should be available. I think I made it public. I licensed it with an MIT license, so at least the code is public, and then I can update the repo to make it public if it's not. Let's see. This just pulls it in, we'll be able to work with it. Before we can do that though, we actually need to embed the directory that has our assets. So, it's a kind of a couple step process, but first off we need to give it a variable that it can store the directory in. And so we're just going to call it assets, and it's going to be of type fs.fs. And that's that virtual file system that we talked about. And then there's another step that we need to do. We actually have to tell the embed component that we want to compile it in with our project. Let's see, I wonder if that's going to import it for us. I don't think it did. All right, so we have to import it into our project, and we did it with this kind of crazy underscore embed, and I think this is the right way to do it. We'll run our program and we'll find out pretty quickly if we did it right or not. And then we have our assets directory that we created, and we just did this go embed comment. It's actually a comment, but the compiler understands the go : embed comment, and it will look for that folder when it compiles our project and then add it as a fs.fs. So we'll run it real quick and see if I did it right. Okay, so far so good. So now we have this ocean.
So did you do that inside of your layout, or is that just in free space?
I put this inside of main.go, and it is outside of anything else. Uh-oh, getting messages while I'm sitting here trying to teach. So yeah, it's like you can have like free space, I guess is a good way to call it. I don't know how I would have called it before, but you can define your constants and different things that way. And so yeah, it's just defined in our free space kind of before our main function, because that's where we're going to be using it. So we should then be able to use that embed, the fs.fs, to load our ocean image. But now instead of doing the os.open, which the OS is the package that knows how to talk to the operating system, the assets now is where we want to load our image from. But if we look at our return type, it's going to return a file and an error just like os.open. So we should be able, if we did everything correctly, we should just be able to change this os.open to assets.open to make sure that we can open it from our embedded file system that we added. So let's give that a try real quick. It told us we had an error. Invalid memory. I think it's probably our fs.fs is wrong. So we might have to go look at the documentation just a little bit to remind myself if we're doing it right. So we'll come into our packages. Embed.fs, that's the problem. So I call this an fs.fs, and that's the interface that it implements, but we actually need an embed.fs to embed it. So So we can remove this underscore embed. All right. Now I've got another error here. Error opening our image. I thought I refreshed my memory on this enough, but this is a good thing to go through, is that we're kind of looking through some problems and trying to figure out. So,
Not actually embed it, or is that why I can't find it?
I am not exactly sure yet. But we've done our assets.open, and we said, hey, this is the file that we want. Please go ahead and open this file for us. And if it can, it will return something that can read the data from the disk. And if it can't, it returns an error. And then we need to handle our error. And that's what we're getting, this error opening ocean image. And we're outputting the error. So it's telling us that it does not exist. So let's come back over here. Drag to most simulating proceed line. Tried to refresh myself on this embed stuff, but it looks like I forgot. That's not good. First off, so I just ran it in the debugger because I'm really curious. And it looks like it just wants to give us this class and not our top level variables. I might have to check some other code real quick. My other code says I did it right, so now we got to do some like live debugging to try to figure out what's going on. That's what I'm wondering. I just added this slash to try it again. ASS, and that should be our directory name. Embed.fs, so that should be our embed.
Is the fact that it's saying it relative to root, so to speak, like the slash asset?
Yeah, that was kind of my initial thought, but that's how I'm using it in my other project, and so I am not quite sure yet. So our main, we're embedding our assets. You know what?
Is that other warning that's above it? About the authority file, is that relevant?
Let's see. Which warning are you?
Just on the XGB, like down in the console, where it's saying it doesn't have the authority file. Is it actually? Or is it
No, I think that's something that comes out every time starting ebitengine. Let's see. I'm looking at all of my other project, and this is exactly how I used it, and that's why I developed it this way, and it's telling me I did it. Let's see, embed. Let's just check our imports again real quick. So we got embed. Go embed. Oh, this might be it. Let's try it, and then I'll talk about the change if it works. Yeah, I have a nasty habit of, I don't know if it's a nasty habit. I have a habit of putting spaces after my comments because I like neatness. In the go embed, it has to be no spaces between the double slash and the go embed. So that was the problem that we had. So we can now load up our game, and that's loading it from the embedded file system. I need a drink. Does anybody have any questions while I'm getting a drink? No questions, huh? Okay. So we're going to move on, and we're going to use this asset loader from this project. Because what it does is it'll cache the images that we load from the system, so we'll have them more easily available. And it gives us some methods that we can work with that will, make it so that we don't have to do all of this every time we want to load an image. It'll be something where we can just use the asset loader and say, give me this image, and then we'll get either an image back or we can tell it to crash the program. And it makes sense in our game to just crash if we have an error. So we'll comment this out for now, and we will create a new variable for our asset loader. And this is going to be this is the asset loader defined in that new library that we just pulled in, that Go2D library that I've provided. So we have a variable for it, but we need to instantiate it. We need to create it actually. And to do that, all it takes is the dir, the fs.fs that we created. Okay, so again, this fs.fs is what's called an interface, which is a collection of methods. And this embed.fs is a struct that implements that interface. So you'll see this embed.fs we can pass in to something that takes an fs.fs. Gosh, that is a mouthful. I don't know why they name it that way, but they did. All right, so our program's gonna yell at us because we have this ocean image right here, and we've commented out the code that creates it. So let's create a new variable for this, and we'll do the asset loader. And we're going to call this, so if you look at the function signature, the first one, load image, it returns an eb10.image or an error. And then the next one is must load, and it just returns an image. That is a convention in Go itself. It's not something written in stone, but any method that says must, that's prefixed with must, just know that when you use it, if there is an error, it will crash the program. So I followed that same convention here. It's used a lot if you're gonna be doing HTML templates and you're doing like a web server, loading templates, you'll call must load template, and it will work that same way. Ocean.ping. Should we try it with something that works, or should we try it with something that won't work so we can watch it fail? You guys like watching stuff crash and burn? Yeah, I do. So let's name it Frog. Just because frogs are cool. And naming is one of the hardest things. So we'll see that we just got a crash. And it was error loading image assets frog.ping file doesn't exist. So that was the same error that we kind of had before. So if we change it back, and then we should be able to run it. And there we go. So we're able to run our program here. So this asset loader.mustLoad is just kind of a convenience method, so you don't have to open the resource and then decode the image and then handle all the errors yourself. So would you guys like to have this commented out so you can reference it, or you can just follow the code and kind of see what's going on here. What are you guys' preferences?
I'm fine tracing the code. Because we'll have that library pulled down, right?
Yeah.
Load.
Yep. Yep. It'll be there and it'll be available. So yeah, we'll clean the code up.
I did try signing into GitLab and it still doesn't let me pull it. But I might have to take away my address.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, you don't have to fix it now, but if we're going to pull it down later.
Yeah, it's just, if you give it a shot later and it doesn't work, send me an email and I will. I mean, I think that it should be open, but it's possible that it's not, and so I'll just have to open it. All right, so we have our ship that is currently an orange blob, right? And we just designed the most amazing ship in Inkscape, so we should probably use it, shouldn't we? So let's add. We're going to add this new sprite variable to our ship that we will be able to draw it. And so our new ship has this request charge, and that was the way that we called back into the game to request a depth charge to be dropped, if we remember. But we're going to need to do a little extra work with our ship. So instead of just returning the new ship that we create, we're going to create a ship variable. And we can return our ship from our new ship method. But we're going to want to set our sprite, our ship image. So right now, we're just going to start with 1, and then we'll kind of work our way up into animating it. But that's going to take some kind of interesting discussions. So if we have our ship.sprite, that's how we want to access it, and we can do this. What's that symbol again? You got it. I know you.
I thought you said you didn't want us to call it an equal sign.
Yep, it's an
Oh, it's an assignment.
assignment. Yes, perfect. So that's where we're going to assign a value to our ship.sprite, and we're going to use the asset loader, and we are going to do a must load, and it's going to be assets ship, and we'll load the first one right now. So you might ask, how in the world do we have access to this asset loader variable? Because we're running everything in the main package right now, we can access any variables that are like declared top level from anywhere else. Maybe not like the cleanest architecture decision, but for right now where our game is still fairly small, I think we can handle that and not have any problems. Down the road, you may want to pass your asset loader around to your constructors. So we have an asset loader. We're going to load our ship, our 0th image, and then we're going to have our draw. So this is where I'm going to have to remember, because we drew our ocean, right? And we did a couple steps. Let's see, let's just go back to our example here. So when we use the game engine and we call a draw, it's going to draw at the 0, 0 corner, right? Our top left corner. And if we want to be able to change it, we're going to have to use these options. So we're going to have to create a new image options again. we're not going to worry about changing the alpha, but we do need to change where it is drawn. And that's because we're driving our little orange rectangle back and forth right now. So hopefully we can get our ship in there. So we have our X and our Y. And these are probably going to ask for float 64s, is my guess. Yeah. So when we started out, I don't know why the draw field rect takes a float 32 and why the translate takes a float 64. But a lot of the other methods that we're using are going to use float 64s. So it makes... It won't do an implicit, but like we can say, hey, convert this to a float 64, and then we can cast it if we want to. And that's probably what we'll do right now, because we have our depth charges are drawing rectangles with float 32s. But when we get a depth charge image that we want to draw, then we'll probably change our entity base type to be a float 64, or our embedded type. So we've given it a new position, and we get a screen passed in, and then we can draw our sprite, and we're going to draw it with these options. So if we did everything right, instead of seeing our orange rectangle, and it looked like we didn't, let's see, must load image. That's just telling us that we're having another invalid memory error. From our ship. So what this is telling me is that we're calling into our asset loader before we've actually initialized it. Because our game itself is what is creating our ship. So we'll put our asset loader there, and we'll try it again. Okay, so our ship is sinking. So we need to change its position, right? Trying to decide if we want to dig into some of our components again in this library. So in game development, there's something called an entity component system. And we're not necessarily building our game with an entity component system, but it's the idea that you can have like a core entity and then attach components onto it to get additional features. And one of those is I've developed this origin component where it'll draw a dot on the screen where it says the origin is. Or there's a hitbox component that will draw a box where it thinks the hitbox is for a game object. We can potentially start looking at adding some of these. I don't know if we will at the moment, just because we're going to probably end up needing to change some things. And my awesome drawing skills took up a little bit of time at the beginning. But our ship was kind of low. So what's the variable that determines where our height in the water is? Which one is that? So we've got our origin up in the left. What's left to right? X. And what's up and down? Y. So our Y is just too much. So we'll cut it in half and see what it does to our ship. Now it's a hover ship, so we went too far. Sometimes this really is just a guessing game. Like one of my components says it will tell you where your mouse is located. So you can run your mouse and it will tell you the X and Y, so you can position things without guessing. That actually might not be a bad component to add in. So we've got about 30 minutes. Would you guys rather animate a bob in the ship, or would you rather look at the component to output where the mouse is on the screen? So that helps us in positioning things.
Either one sounds good.
Okay, so we will, I think the bobbing the ship will have a cooler a cooler impact, if you will. We're gonna omit some things that we're gonna have to talk about. I said a finite state machine, and Brandon kind of smiled a little bit because it's gonna be kind of crazy to start discussing, but we're gonna have to discuss them at some point, at least high level, just for the idea that some animations take precedence over other animations. So like a hit animation takes precedence over an idle animation, and you need to have the animation state run to completion, or else, you know, like the idle will just take over every frame. So we'll have to discuss it a little bit, but we won't worry about it right now. So right now, I know I wrote all this code, but I'm gonna have to go and remind myself some of it. Isn't that how it always happens? You write a little bit of code and you look back and you're like, wow, who wrote this? So we have what's called an animate component. And this animate component takes an array of sprites, or a slice of sprites, and a couple other things. So we'll work on getting our sprites and but we'll need to start with this animatable. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. Let's see. Display. Is new animate component. So what is it that we need to animate? Are we animating our ship? So we need a way to communicate to the library that there's something in our code that we want to animate, but the library knows nothing about our ship. Our ship is defined in our game, and the library doesn't know anything about it. So the way that we do that is the library has specified a number of interfaces that or methods for an interface that have to be implemented so that the engine knows, at least it has enough information that it can work off of a type that it doesn't know anything about. So the first one is this originer. And we're gonna have to pull in another library. And this is vector. A vector, who knows what a vector is? Not like a Java vector or a C++ vector, but a math vector. So it's something that denotes position and direction. So an X and a Y, basically. So we're going to need an interface. We're going to have to satisfy this at, and it's going to have to return a mutable vector for us. We just happen to have an entity that we define that has an X and Y that is basically this at. So we can add a method to our entity, and it's just going to be at mutable vector. And then we can return, let's see, I need to remind myself real quick if that is the best way to, let's see. Yes, let's see. Update. Yeah, so it just takes our X position and our Y position. But again, we're going to have problems because it's going to ask for a float 64. We're going to cast it right now, and then when we get to adding another item, we'll change it. We'll do some refactoring. So now we have this at method defined. So we need to determine what else our animatable takes. So it takes a scale. So you're asking earlier, does the game let you scale your components? It does. And we can actually use this animatable component, which will do that for us. So we're going to put it on our ship because down the road, you know, we're like this at is common for everything, but our ship might want to scale differently than a depth charge, differently than a submarine. And we're just going to return a scale of 1. So it won't actually scale it. And then is horizontal flipped. So if you're playing like a platformer and you've only have your assets drawn facing the right, inside of your game, if your player moves left, you can say, is horizontal flipped true? And then it will flip it the other direction. And is vertical flipped is the same. So we'll come back to our ship. And we'll put these in. Okay. So we're not going to flip horizontal, at least not at this point. Like all the sync sub style games I've ever seen or played, they just kind of have the ship facing one direction. And then this draw offset is kind of an interesting thing. It has to do with, say your sprite for one of your animations is drawn off of a different position than the others, then you can kind of shift your sprite around the draw offset so it matches up with your hitbox more accurately. Right now, we're just going to say there's no draw offset. Okay, so we have this, and we've looked a little bit at it. So it's going to take a subject, and we have our ship, which is now our subject. And then it's going to ask for a frame rate, or how often do we want this to be changed. We can just give it a number for right now. And then it's going to ask for an array of sprites. And this is where we're going to use the library again. Asset loader. And we have this load concurrent directory. And it takes a path. So if we look, we're in asset ship. And then it's asking for an extension. So if you wanted to use a JPEG or ping or something like that, you could use those. But we saved it as a ping. and then it's going to ask for the total. And right now we have 3. And our idle animation might be a little weird. We'll have to kind of talk about it if we get to that point. But now we can pass in our idle images. And then if we look back at this animate component, we've got this ops ... animation, animate opt. I might be changing this down the road because I've read some stuff that makes it a little bit easier. But these are just so we can say, hey, center the image. Right now we're not centering it, or you can disable the loop. So like, and a hit animation, once you're hit, you run the animation, but you don't loop the animation. So that's why you would want to disable that. But right now we don't need to do either of those things. So we have a ship.idle animation based upon our idle, or ship idle here. Inside of our update, we need to, let's see, idle animation. We need to update our idle animation because we want it to change at our frame rate. And if we don't ever call update, then it won't know to change what is the current frame that we're working on. And then we can come down here to our draw, and we can hide this draw again. And we can screen, oh, actually, our idle animation now has a draw method on it. And we pass the screen. And you see, we've got another X offset and another Y offset. We just talked about that. Why would we need another X offset and a Y offset? So the first X and Y offset that we talked about was due to like the individual frames and how they're drawn. This X and Y offset actually has to do with the camera. So like in a game, if you want a camera to follow a player, you need to draw everything according to the offset of that camera. We don't have a camera in this game necessarily. It's just a fixed location, so we don't have to put an X offset in this one. So if we did it right, we should be able to run this and see. So we're a little fast and we're a little choppy. And we're probably like changing too much.
So what did you set it at? 6?
I set it at 6.
What does that mean exactly? The 6 relative to your update?
Yeah, so it's the frame rate that we've chosen. And I just kind of picked that because a lot of the game assets that I've worked with in the past have been built for 6. But we do have a problem.
But, sorry, what does that mean though? Because the update's being called how many times a second? And then
Yeah, so the update, we'll look at it. So the update's being called every 16 milliseconds. And inside of our animate component, we have an update. And we're looking at the last time that we ran an animation. And if it's greater than our frame interval, then we will update our animation and then run the animation. And we have a check here. You know, does anybody know what a modulus operator is? So we're running a modulus operator so that if we go beyond how many items there are, we'll just go back to 0. And so that'll loop for us. Excuse me. So every time we change the frame, we call last display change. And it updates a timestamp on our animate component. But our frame interval gets set right here. So we pass in a frame rate and say we want, 6 frames a second. Then it will do that math for us.
Doing the math in here to actually translate to how fast the update's being called.
Yeah. So a lot of this kind of stuff is like, oh, I don't know if we have time to sit down and talk about fully writing a complete animate component or something like that. But there's another problem that we're having with our image here. So I just slowed it down, but you'll see that it goes, instead of like going from the top one and then going back to the middle one and then back down, like we're we're hitting multiple. So there's a couple ways that you could do that. You could go into here and you could say, well, I want to take the second item and append it and add it, or you could come back into here and we could create another one. So if we wanted to, we could copy this. Let's see, I got to think this right. So we're going up, and it's actually this one we want to copy. And then we'll paste. And then this one we're just going to say 3. And then if we run it, it should give us a slightly smoother animation, but it still seems like it doesn't want to. Let's see.
Did you ever fix that they were out of order or something?
Yeah, I did. At least I think I did.
I don't know.
But part of it is we're drawing too high, so I need to go back in and tweak them and change it so it's only just a couple pixels offset instead of multiple. Like, so I'm not a graphic designer, so we're running into a couple issues that way, but not an illustrator. But yeah, so we have an animating ship. Some things need to be tweaked a little bit to make it run a little bit better, but it's working. Does anybody have any questions about this week? No? Well, I don't know if I have anything else for today. Except for I need to sit down and fix the ship animation so it's not as drastic.
We don't have time for the component you were talking about adding. How long is that?
If you guys want to, we could look into that if you guys want to.
Yeah, I don't know how long it would take.
I don't think it'll take too long.
Unless, someone else has another question. That's great.
Okay, so we've got our game here, and we've got our components library. So I've got a debug, and I can't remember exactly.
Is there a way to only include something if you're in compile this debug, or does it have the same just go everything?
There are some things that you can do when you're compiling. Do you mean like running, like building debug symbols and all of that, or just?
Well, no, just, there's that part of it, but if you're compiled in, you can check a flag, so like include it or don't. Like if someone's
Yeah,
playing the game,
yeah.
they want that,
So
they want it.
there's a couple ways that you can do that. I don't know if I actually have the mouse pointer. I might not have committed it yet. So maybe we'll just talk about this real quick. So there's a couple things that you can do. And it's called a go tag. And off the top of my head, I can't remember the exact syntax. Not struct tags, but build tags. Yeah, build tags. So if you look, let's look for the file that has a build tag on it. It's one of those things that if I remember that they have it, but I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. It's this idea of like adding a build tag. It's just a comment that sits at the top of the file. And then when you go to run the compiler, you can pass this -tags switch to the compiler, and it will only compile in files that have that. So one way that I use it is I built a little web framework in Go, and you don't want to have to recompile your code every time you're changing an HTML template. And so I have it set up that if I'm building a debug release, it just looks at the default file system instead of an embedded file system. So I can edit my files, like my template files, and see my updates on a refresh. But then when I want to build a release version with an embedded set of assets, then I can build a release version, and then it will do all of that embedding that we talked about. And so I just have a build tag that's like a dash, that's a release, and then I have a build tag that's a debug. And then I can just, depending on which one I build, it will build that. And I actually have it set up so that the debug is the default. But I don't use it frequently, so I can't tell you all the ins and outs, but it is build tags. Another way that you can do it is you can have like a underscore Linux or an underscore Mac or an underscore Windows, and then it will just build in a platform specific version as well. I was looking for the component that I had for drawing the pointer location, and I don't think I've actually pushed the code to that repository, so I don't know if I have it available to go over. Let's see. Pointer Y, and we'll do float 64. So we'll just work on it. So on an update, there is util dot mouse. I can't remember off the top of my head about the mouse location. So documentation. V2. Is mouse button pressed. Cursor position, that's what we need. So we have a cursor position, and it's an int, not a float. So every update we can G pointer X, oh man, and then G dot pointer Y, and dot cursor position. So that will set our cursor position in our update. And then in our draw, we can come here and vector. So we have a couple different classes of vector. Util.debug print. So debug print will print things to the screen for us. So we can pass in the screen and then the string that we want. This will be a format string. Pointer X and then G dot pointer Y. So hopefully that will draw on the screen for us, kind of in the top left. All right, so there we go. So now we have a little bit more insight of where we could draw our ship. So the plan is I can fix the animations a little bit so it's not like it's launching itself out of the water. But yeah, so we've got our position, and then that will kind of help us when we want to think about placing submarines and using some logic for that. Well, any questions? Okay, Well, yeah, I think that's everything that I have for tonight.
So if you wanted to keep it moving, like have that much movement, you just have to basically build more frames. You wanted to.
Yeah, if you want.
The way you're gonna fix it is just make it not move as far, or are you gonna add more?
Yeah, I'll probably end up making it so it only moves just a few small pixels out of the water instead of that many. Because that's quite a lot of movement, but my drawing skills aren't the best, so I don't feel too bad at this point.